Today on the Communicators, we'll meet with the head of a coalition lobbying Congress and the administration of President-elect Barack Obama to develop a national broadband strategy. James Baller is the head of the US Broadband Coalition.
James Baller of the US Broadband Coalition. He is their founder, our guest this week on the Communicators. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
And joining us in the questioning today, and Veigel of Communications Daily, serves as their associate managing editor. Thanks for coming by as well.
To be here.
Mr. Baller, to start off things, you and others watched the YouTube addresses that the President-elect Barack Obama had been making over various topics. His most recent one dealt with issues of broadband. I want you to take a look at what he had to say and then respond to it.
Be happy to do that.
It is unacceptable that the United States ranks 15th in the world in broadband adoption. Here in the country that invented the internet, every child should have the chance to get online. And they'll get that chance when I'm president, because that's how we'll strengthen America's competitiveness in the world.
Mr. Baller, that desire aside, what does the President-elect have to do to make that happen?
Let me say, first of all, it is wonderful to hear the President saying that. He said it over and over again during his campaign. His comments went beyond that. During the YouTube presentation, he addressed in the clip that we watched the necessity of having every child connected to the internet. It is disgraceful that we don't have that accomplished yet. It is disgraceful that the United States has dropped as it has over the course of the last few years. There's much to be done. We need to make sure that every American has affordable access to broadband and the equipment and skills to be able to use it to their advantage. But beyond that, broadband is an enabler of just about everything today, and that will be increasingly the case in the future. It will be part of economic development initiatives. It'll be part of environmental protection, energy security, homeland security, public safety, education. With that at the core of everything we do, we need to find ways to ensure that America develops broadband rapidly, because we are in a world in which the other leading nations are doing that. And if we hope to remain competitive, we have to do the same.
What he says is the desire. How do you make it practical, though? How do you take that desire and make it workable, especially in his administration?
Part of the driving force for the coalition that we have developed, you mentioned the US Broadband Coalition, is to bring together a wide spectrum of stakeholders, from utilities, from the telephone and cable industries, from the educational sector, from users of broadband, bring them together in an environment of constructive engagement, and to talk about those issues and to find a way together to find solutions. They may or they may not be perfect. I personally believe that if we set our goals high enough, that there will be so many advantages to all concerned that everyone will benefit from this, and we will find ways to take advantage of those opportunities, provided we set our goals high enough.
We'll talk about those goals in just a moment, but first, Dan Veigel.
Jim, you were very successful in bringing together this coalition that has many different members in it. But I did notice that Comcast was not part of it, and Comcast has been involved in a dispute over its management of its networks, which is sort of the net neutrality issue that some have said could be an impediment to getting actual broadband out there once legislation would be developed. Is there any reason why they weren't involved? Were they fearful of ongoing litigation, do you think? Or
Comcast would be welcome to be involved, as would the other major cable companies, as would small cable companies. We welcome everyone. The process that we followed in attempting to bring participants into the group was imperfect. What we tried to do was to ensure that the group would be broadly representative of a cross-section of American life. In the case of the cable industry, we brought in the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, which tends to represent the large cable companies, and also the American Cable Association, which represents smaller cable providers. American Public Power Association is there. Many of its electric utilities provide communication services, including cable services. So the interests of the cable industry were involved in our initiative. We would love to have Comcast and the others involved individually now. This dialogue, we hope to be as open and inclusive as we can make it. We did not reject in any way, nor do we know that Comcast would not have been involved earlier if we had invited them. We just went for NCTA and ACA first.
So there was no direct invitation made?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
not as far as I know.
Do you have a follow-up?
Well, I guess my follow-up is, what are the next steps? Because you have brought together a number of parties who have been at war in public, at least in the past, and seem to now at least embrace some general principles.
Right.
So what happens next?
We are going to form 6 committees. Those committees will focus on a variety of issues, and I'll tell you what those are in a minute. And we hope that the participants will be actively involved in populating those committees, working on them, rubbing up against each other, and seeing where they agree or disagree on facts, on policies, and see how far we can go toward developing consensus. The committees are as follows. First, the first committee is to make the case for the need for a national broadband strategy. Those of us who've already been involved are convinced of that, but we need to make the case to the American people and to Congress and the President. We don't need to make the case to the President. We know that he understands this. But we'd like to flesh out the considerations why that's true. What are the benefits of broadband? How does it tie into education? How does it tie into health care? How does it tie into the public safety and all those others? How does it benefit our 100 million young people? And many of us have worked on those issues. We've got a wealth of information. We'd like to put it all together and make the most persuasive case. So the first committee will make the case for a national broadband strategy and for broadband as a specific item of great importance to the United States now and going forward. The second committee will focus on goals. As I know you've heard over the years, people are ships passing in the night on goals. Some say that we should focus on ensuring that every American has access to some level of broadband, and they debate how much that broadband should be, what capacity it should have. Some say that we should be focusing on the higher end. We should be a 100 megabit nation or a gigabit nation. Some say we should do this in 2 years. Some say we should do this in 5 years. Some say we should have different standards for different areas of the country. That was one of the reasons that motivated me as well, is to get everybody together and say, which of these goals are compatible with each other? We are going to need to do several things at the same time, including ensuring that every American has access to a certain level of broadband, but we can't stop there. We also need to address the higher end of the capacity.
So that the desire and the goal laid out, you're going to have to depend on these various companies that Ann talked about to help that happen as far as execution is concerned. If there is a rubbing up against each other, I imagine it's over turf. If it's the cable company doing the laying out, if it's the telcos, if it's other organizations. So how does that help or hinder what you want to do in the end as far as your goal is concerned?
We've only gotten to the first 2 committees so far. So the first committee establishes the need for policy. The second one examines what our goals are, and hopefully we will come together on goals. The third committee looks at metrics. Now, we have, as you know, President-elect Obama started out by saying that we've dropped to 15th. There are statistics that support that. he was referring to one measure. That measure is penetration by a measure of population. There are individuals who say we should be looking at different statistics. Some say we should be looking at additional statistics. In my own case, I think it's extremely important that we look at speeds and cost and growth as well as mere penetration.
More than acreage of areas covered.
So you'll try to come up with
Right.
something that comes all together.
Exactly, and what we need to have is some consensus on what statistics are important, what statistics should we adopt to embrace to ensure that we are on target to meeting our goals, where we can assign accountability. It is important in a competitive world for us to have statistics that we can use to compare ourselves to the other leading nations. What are those? Should we be measuring wireless? How should we be measuring it? And so our second committee will focus on
How about,
our third.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm eager to get to the end here. Does one of your committees focus on specific legislation? For instance, do we do tax incentives? Does the Universal Service Program get changed such that it now supports broadband? Is that one of the committees?
The next two committees will focus on questions like that. And let me talk about them together because there's considerable overlap. One of the committees will focus on supply side issues. One will focus on demand side issues. The supply side issues are sometimes spoken of in terms of availability. The demand side issues are sometimes spoken of in terms of adoption and use and accessibility. Those committees will ask, what is holding us back? Are there financial, are there legal, are there other kinds of considerations that are preventing us from achieving the goals, and what remedies are available to us to overcome those barriers? And there are educational barriers. Why is it that broadband is in some places available but not being used? There are access to computers. That's a major issue. If we had more computers in more places, we'd have more usage, more demand. How do we go about ensuring that that happens? And so those two committees will focus on that kind of issue, and they will address legal and other barriers.
And I suspect that legal being one of them and other issues, financials might be at the top of that list, like you had said, only because we've seen cases throughout the United States where cities say offer free broadband programs, but yet they don't manage to survive only because of fiscal availability to keep it going. Isn't that a factor to consider?
Well, it's a fact or a factoid. We don't know. We need to have better facts. We need to understand better what is happening and what is not happening. And yes, those are considerations that need to be taken into account, very much so. And the last committee will deal with implementation issues. Once we have a set of goals and an understanding of the barriers and what steps we need to take in order to overcome those barriers, how do we go about implementing this program? What's the best way? President-elect Obama has talked about having a chief technology officer at the cabinet level. We think that's a very good start. Many of us do. But it may be that additional measures may be useful. It could be realigning existing departments or agencies. It may be other things. Whatever those other things might be, we will address those through the framework of the implementation issue. There might be recommendations on legislation. There might be other kinds of things, recommendations to the financial sector. And all of these things, we hope, will bubble up into a conference of some kind late in the spring where we report on what progress we've made.
During that time, and maybe even now, although most people don't want to talk about this, have you had any discussions with the transition team, letting them know what you're working on at least? Maybe just getting some people alerted that this is coming down the road and can be helpful to them if they're focused on this goal?
Yes, they're aware that, that this initiative is underway. Let me also stress, Ann and Pedro, that we have taken the first step. It's an important first step because, as you've observed, it's unusual to have people who are in the habit of disagreeing with one another for very legitimate reasons to be cautious about the prospect of finding a consensus. And we are only at the very first stages of this. Creating the positive environment, creating a framework on which everyone agreed is an important first step, but we haven't achieved anything of lasting value yet. And as I said during our event on Capitol Hill, I had 2 calls of action to issue. One was this formal call to action that we'd already developed. The second was to the current and future participants to take this process in the serious vein in which those of us involved intended. The stakes for America are so high, we have to work together in a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect. I personally believe there is nothing that we can't achieve if we set our goals high enough and work with one another with an intent on achieving success. And so far, over the course of the last year, in our one-to-one conversations, in our small meetings, in our bigger meetings, capped by the December 2nd event, the spirit is there. And now the details come, and the farther we can go in developing consensus, the better off we will be. Even if we can't succeed in all ways, we will, through the process of getting people talking to each other, find new opportunities that we never even thought about or never even considered.
What avenue, I guess, in all this talking and planning, what does your approach offer that would improve upon, some would argue, the free market approach, saying that companies individually are undertaking these tasks anyway by offering broadband services and by building out new areas where broadband's available and helping schools and such and so forth?
I don't dismiss the possibility that that could be the outcome of this process. I personally don't believe it, and the signatories to this call to action agreed that government at all levels has a constructive role to play in increasing availability, adoption, and use. What that role might be remains to be defined. I think we have a complex environment, a complex economy in which pure market forces can take us so far. Pure market forces would not have produced the highway system. They would not have produced railroads. They would not have produced electricity across the nation. There are times, transformative times, when new technologies emerge that have so much potential to change life for the better that no individual player in the market can make the kind of investment and get the one-on-one return that is worth it. And in this instance, we have all of these players across the spectrum coming together to say, let's talk about what we need collectively and individually and as a country. My suspicion is that we will not come out of this saying, let's just let the market take care of this. That's what our policy was for the last 8 years. And that policy has taken us to where we are today, which is good, but it is not as good as it could be, and it is not as good as we need it to be going forward.
So are you on a fast track? Because there have been discussions about the upcoming economic recovery package that Congress is likely to probably try to get passed in January, that needs to have a component for broadband, because the argument's being made that broadband is an important part of infrastructure. In fact, I believe President-elect Obama has said that, and said it quite specifically in his speech. So you're doing a lot of planning, but you might need to move quickly, or maybe be ready, or
that's a difficult question.
nudging people at least.
Right, that's a difficult question, and we're not geared to fast-tracking discussions that are as complex as this. There are some things that many of us agree on already. As I mentioned before, we discovered there's a lot of consensus already on a number of issues. But we are also a forum, so to speak, where different interest groups have come together. They're finding allies on a variety of issues, and some of those issues are highly relevant to economic stimulus package. As I understand,
Can you offer an example of something that would be relevant to a stimulus package?
well, the stimulus, the framework of the stimulus, as I understand it, is to focus on activities that will create, in the short term, jobs, new jobs and retention of existing jobs. There are a number of things that could be done in the short term that will contribute to that. Then there are a number of things that are more systemic, that you wouldn't want to rush into a national strategy that is going to govern the way that we attack some of these fundamental issues of our economy. We wouldn't, even if we could, we wouldn't want to fast track that. Those things need to be aired. Everyone has a stake in them. Those voices need to be heard. They need feedback. That process needs to go forward. There are a variety of short-term proposals that members of the group are making individually. Some of them are finding that you and I have common interests. Let's get together on these initiatives or the others. Our group, as such, unless I'm very surprised, will not be able to provide consensus support in the short term. But many of our members, and we encourage them to get together, will be able to do that, and we'll help them.
What if something emerged in the stimulus package, for example, like tax incentives for companies to expand their networks? That seems like at least fairly benign. Would you endorse something like that? Do you envision your group being able to come together on something very targeted like that, or depreciation, an ability to depreciate equipment, routers, such?
Well, let me just give you an example speaking to that issue. You characterize that as benign, and I don't disagree with that. But there are many others in the group who would not benefit from that kind of stimulus, who do have contributions to make. For example, new providers that don't have necessarily profits against which to offset credits, or and then there are others who are nonprofits who are not governed by the same tax incentives. So a package of incentives that come from the economic stimulus program might well be necessary. Some that work for, let's say, large providers, some that work for competitors, some that work for local governments that want to contribute, some that would enhance the ability of public and private sectors to work together. There are tax disincentives to that could be done. If we had, if we tried to say what a whole package should be, and we had a package that worked for a broad cross-section of our members, yes, indeed, we might be able to come together and say, we support this. But if it were just one proposal that worked for some and didn't work for others, I don't see that we would necessarily be able to come together, even if our members would agree to something like a particular tax incentive, as long as they had some ability to participate as well. They might not be able to support it if that were the only thing that were on the table.
As we talk, the FCC itself is in possible consideration of a plan that would offer wireless broadband, and they'll take a vote on it scheduled for their next meeting. How does that work for you as a plan, or at least as a model?
I would respectfully not address that, because there's a great deal of controversy on all sides of that issue. And I'm trying to lead from the middle and let those who have differences of opinion on issues like that work them out as our process proceeds. And
So controversy in the model, or that it was offered before as a plan?
there's controversy in the model itself, sure. There are some that support it, there's some that oppose it, there's some that think it ought to be changed in various ways. And on an issue like that, I would just as soon say that's something we could talk about and perhaps make recommendations over time, but we're not ready to, as a group, address that particular question. And so as a person in the center of the group, I would prefer not to get ahead of the group, if you know what I mean,
Well,
and offer my own.
being in the center, do you hear a lot from each? Is there quite a bit of controversy about that in your members?
There is.
Yeah.
There is. And when I say that, I'm addressing the fact that over the course of the last year and a half or so, I've had countless discussions with members on a one-on-one basis and otherwise. Within the group itself, we have not had debates on particular issues at any level of depth beyond the establishment of the framework, which was itself a matter of considerable sensitivity. Every word, every sentence in this call to action was debated at length, and I credit the strong desire of the participants to come together and agree that we were able to get this far. Many folks thought we'd never get to the place that we are now. So we're here, and now the question is how far we can go.
Some of the points of the plan include that every home business, public and private institution should have broadband, access should be open, that network operators should manage their networks responsibly, and that the internet broadband marketplace should be competitive. Ultimately, this will have to deal with price of the consumer. And for those, especially in rural areas, how do you pay for something like this? Should it be provided for them?
That's again one of the questions of detail that we will be addressing in the stage that follows. And there are different solutions to different challenges in different areas. We are not a monolithic country. Conditions in the major cities are not the same as they are in rural areas. Technologies are available in some areas where some providers are based that are not available in other areas, and different solutions will have to emerge. And so, yes, the important thing is that we've recognized this as something that we need to tackle, that we're committed to working to address, and we'll see how far we can go with that.
We have time for one more question.
Why did you get involved in this?
Because I think that I owe it to America. It's been, I grew up a child of Holocaust survivors who thought of life as being something that they were privileged to live, and instilled in me the sense that you have to give back. And so to me, to see America go from being the land that was so important for us to being challenged in the world at large, and seeing a pattern of drift downward seemed to me to require personal involvement, not only on my own part, but on the part of many others. And so that's my commitment, and I'm calling on everybody else to contribute to it.
If you're interested in finding out more about this effort, the website is www.bb4us.net.
And the 4 is the number 4.
4 is the number 4. James Bowler is the founder of the US Broadband Coalition, and joining us also today, and Veigel of Communications Daily. And to both of you, thanks for being on the Communicators.
Thank you.
Thank you.